here's a wedding ceremony and you follow it step by step, and here's a funeral ceremony. And I wanted to blow that out of the water. And so it's like a choose your own adventure experience where here's a bunch of things to inspire you, pick and choose the ones that you like, and then change them if you want.
In those significant life-changing moments like becoming a parent or losing a parent, it's very easy to feel lost and ungrounded. We might think to ourselves, ceremony could maybe be a useful thing right now, but where do I start? As the saying goes, there's an app for that, and it's beautiful. This is Shame Piñata. I'm Colleen Thomas. Welcome to Shame Piñata, where we talk about creating rites of passage for real-life transitions. Today, I'm excited to invite you to join me on a behind-the-scenes look into Be Ceremonial, the world's first ceremony creation platform. It's an app that you can download from the app or the Google Play Store, and it lets you build simple, customizable ceremonies for any purpose. Just to give you a sense of how it works, I'm going to open the app on my phone right now and tell you what I see. So on the home screen is a list of the latest offerings, including new ceremonies and free virtual workshops. If I click the Create button, I can open a free sample ceremony and customize that, or I can choose from a list of ceremonies with a defined topic, including trying to conceive, mother blessing, miscarriage, abortion, wedding, divorce, terminal diagnosis, or sitting vigil. And that's only a partial list. Okay, so here's how building a ceremony works. If I click into the free sample ceremony, I'm asked to choose if this ceremony will be for me or for someone else. I think it's cool that you can actually gift a ceremony to a friend. Then I'm asked to choose if it will be me doing it alone, with other people, or virtually. And then I can begin building my ceremony, which is structured into 5 parts: opening, past, present, future, and closing. For the opening, the app gives me 3 choices: opening space, candle lighting, and 3 breaths. I can click into any of these to see what they're about, what materials and preparation I'd need to do them, and a list of steps to follow. And I can look through all the offerings until I found a flow that works best for me. For example, I might choose to take 3 breaths to open my ceremony, release the past with a fire ritual, take a ritual walk to honor the present, and then ceremonially cross a threshold to step into my new future. And finally, close with a water ceremony. Once I've chosen all of these components, they will be available as a step-by-step list that I can have with me as I prepare and actually hold the ceremony. It's actually very cool and user-friendly, and it takes some of the guesswork and groundwork, really, out of building a ceremony so that I can really focus on what's moving in me and choose ritual components that match that flow. Now that we've taken a deep dive into the app itself, let's come back out to the bigger picture so I can bring you into a conversation I had last spring with Sheldon, the co-founder and CEO of Be Ceremonial. Here's a listen. I'm curious, how did you find your way to ceremony in life?
I've always been a community seeker, a connector, a convener. I was recently at a retreat that I was hosting around ritual, and a girlfriend of mine from high school was telling me about these, we didn't call it ceremonies then, but she's like, you would host these gatherings and you were so intentional in the questions you would ask and the way you would bring people together. She was the first of any of my friends to have a baby, and she remembers, I had forgotten about this, but she remembered I gathered all of her girlfriends around in the room, and I had found this little owl shaker, and I passed it around and asked everybody to infuse it with, wishes and blessings for her. And that was, 12 or 13 years ago. So I'm constantly reminded that this path hasn't been A to B kind of path. It's been an unfolding. When I was 20 years old, my mom went through breast cancer, and my mom and I are very close, and I was living in Montreal, and she was here in Vancouver, And I remember getting the phone call from her, and just like every instinct in me wanted to just get on a plane and come home and be with her. But she didn't want that. She was in the middle of exams, and she really needed me to stay where I was so she could focus on herself. But what she ended up doing, I now see as ritual, is she would find these books, and she was introduced to Jungian kind of theory and Marion Woodman and Women Who Won with the Wolves and all these books that, she was just discovering. And she would buy 2 copies, and she would send me one in Montreal. And I remember I'd get these books, and I would be reading them at the same time she was reading them on the other coast of Canada, and opening up this kind of world of the divine feminine and what it means to connect with your ancestors and your roots and your heritage. And I'm a white settler on stolen lands here in Canada, and I have really struggled with my place in this part of the world, and where do I fit and where do I belong. I think that need for belonging has been a huge theme in my life. And these books kind of taught me how to connect with that part of myself, and with my mom and with her mom and with her mother's mother, and this beautiful lineage of women and men. So it's a tricky question, and one that continues to evolve. But if I am being completely honest with myself, I have always been ceremonial. I just was never given the language or the permission to kind of see myself that way. So I've had to really come into it on my own and reclaim that space in a way that feels like me.
Megan echoed one of my own ideas about ritual, that of it being self-organizing, that we know how to do ritual together. It's one of our inherent gifts. We might have just forgotten.
It's so interesting because people always say to me, "Oh, I could never do what you do. I could never do this." And I think, do what? I'm actually not doing, I always say to people, I'm actually not doing this. I'm setting the container, I'm offering the invite. I've studied a lot under the art of hosting. I don't know if you know it. It's like a global wide kind of way of gathering people. And their philosophy is like the invitation is everything. If you can send out an invite and let people know what to expect and what to prepare and how to feel empowered in the space so that they're not having to look for the leader, like who's in charge, like that's one of the worst ways to convene, is to have that hierarchy. So the idea of the circle way, of having everybody step in and be responsible for co-creating the ceremony, the ritual environment, has always guided me, and I'm a firm believer. And I say that every time I convene a ceremony or a retreat or rituals with friends, I focus on the invitation, and I say we are all step into this, and we are now going to co-create the space together. And if you need to be quiet, if you need to walk away, if you need to scream, if you need to do anything, that is okay. Like you're making your own experience. And I think that's just a way of thinking that we haven't really been taught in our kind of capitalistic patriarchal culture of the top down, right? It's this feels rebellious for a lot of people. So
and it's kind of the same principle with the app, right? Because you've created this technology that people can, there's tools, there's framework, there's structure, there's examples, there's ideas, all this kind of thing, but you're not there helping somebody in person, helping somebody create a ceremony, and they can create a ceremony. Like I created 2 today that are really important to me, but I'm not ready to do them yet, but I have the framework set for when I'm ready to step into them. And so you won't be with me when I do them. I mean, unless I could call you later and talk to you maybe because I know you, but
please.
But you won't really be there with me. But yet you've created you've given the invitation and you've created the container.
Yeah. And it took me a long time to see how ritual and ceremony, which for me is so sacred and so precious and so important in my life and in the lives of those that I serve and that I work with, to see it as bridging with technology. So backtrack a little bit, my husband and I decided to get married 8 or 9 years ago now. And we looked at the wedding kind of template that was in front of us. And we'd been to so many weddings before, and they were so lovely and so wonderful. And they weren't us. And I never was like, oh, this felt exactly like me, because it was exactly like my friend or my family member. So I really wanted to learn how to intentionally craft a wedding that represented our values. So that was our first ceremony to co-create together. And I think we did a really wonderful job. And shortly after our wedding, we tried to get pregnant, and we did. And 7 weeks later we miscarried, and then we got pregnant again and miscarried, and a third time miscarried. And each time it was like this invisible loss that nobody knew. It was just, this was 7 years ago, so it was just starting to kind of get a little bit more traction in terms of the media and people talking about it a little bit more, but nobody was talking about a ceremony where I could honor and say goodbye. I was never even offered any of the remains from the hospitals after my DNC procedures. I know now I could have asked for it and they would have had to have given it to me. I didn't know that then. I didn't know what I was allowed to do. Everything felt so kind of, the healthcare system owned everything, right? You don't ever think of it as being something there that you can challenge or that you can confront.
Yeah.
So I started to create my own rituals around my loss, and my husband Johan and we created our own rituals and ceremonies to acknowledge not only the loss of life, but also the loss of the stories we'd started to tell ourselves. I had a lot of growing anxiety. What was happening? Why was my body doing this? Will I ever get pregnant? I was in my mid to late 30s at that point, so there was this time pressure that was both external and internal. But yeah, I think that time for me, it was really about learning how these things that I naturally wanted and needed in my life were rituals. It was ceremony. It was, I wanted to sit with my girlfriends and not only share my story, but hear their story. I wanted to, every year on a due date or on a loss date, I wanted to have something that I could do that would connect me so that I wouldn't forget, that I wouldn't grow further away from it.
At the same time that Megan and Johan were dealing with pregnancy loss, they were also losing Johan's father to ALS.
There were so many invisible moments along that journey that we did not know how to recognize, a diagnosis when you first, when he first received it, but when he first told us, like, what do you do in those moments? How do you bring ritual and bring ceremony to that moment when the floor comes crashing out from underneath you? And then over the next, 6 months and year and 2 years, as he started to lose his capacities and we started to lose that kind of feeling of hope for the future. And there were so many of those moments that I did not know at the time I could have brought ritual into. I could have been kind of slowly building out that kind of legacy. So we went through that experience, and then when the pandemic hit and my husband was, found himself at home and really wanted to imagine something new. He's a problem solver. He's like, I just want to build something that will help people. That just has been his driver. It has been a really interesting experience to bridge ceremony with technology, and one that I continue to learn about. But I'll get emails from people on a weekly basis about how they were gifted something through this experience, or they discovered something, or they were able to honor, a death anniversary in a way that they never thought was possible. And I know for 100% I know without a doubt that I would never have crossed paths with that person had it not been through technology. They'll be in Australia or Belgium or St. Louis, and they'll be reaching out because this app touched them in a certain way. It impacted their experience. So, yeah.
Wow. You're inspiring me now. I'm thinking I have a lot of my good friends. I have their death anniversaries on my calendar, so I remember to reach out to them, and I would love to share your app with them. So as people check out the app and they get started with it, do you have any guidance for them on how to start the process?
Yeah, so the app is, so it's Be Ceremonial, and you are invited in, and there's 2 pillars that make up the app environment. And one is the ability to create your own ceremony, like a DIY approach. And we started with the birth and death aspects, the 2 areas of life, because they're the 2 thresholds. They're usually the places where people are seeking ceremony the most. they have a miscarriage, or they find out they're pregnant, or they want to honor the end of their breastfeeding journey. There's something that happens in that kind of beginning of life stage, or the end of life. They lost a parent, or a death anniversary is coming up, or they've been hanging on to these ashes from a cremation and they don't know what to do with them. So we really started to populate the app with these ceremonies that you could create for yourself around birth and death. And we are now in the midst of bridging out the life cycle. So I am a life cycle celebrant. I work with people on ceremonies around mastectomies and hysterectomies, ceremonies around moving into a new home or leaving a childhood home. I've worked with people who have been fired and lost a job, and they wanted to create a ceremony to kind of honor what that job brought them, and also kind of burn in the fire the things that they wanted to never do again. There are so many points along the life cycle, both visible and invisible, that deserve to be ritualized. They deserve to have that kind of ceremonial intention built into it. So that's a pillar one. That's like one side of the app experience, is to be able to create your ceremonies. And some people might come in and know exactly what they want, and they just want to create a ceremony around a death anniversary, and they can just pay per use. So it's a single time purchase if they want. And then other people are really seeking something more. They're really wanting to understand their own relationship with ritual and ceremony, or they're a care provider. We've got a lot of death doulas and birth doulas and hospice volunteers, midwives, naturopaths, counselors using our app, and they create ceremonies for their clients and their patients. So they're using this as a tool that they can kind of bring to the people that they work with. I've also got a lot of celebrants using this. So there's a wedding ceremony in there, and if you are a celebrant and you've got a new client and you want to kind of give them some ideas as to what's possible in terms of ritual, you can create a wedding ceremony that you then send to them, and they can pick and choose the rituals they like. You can then add new ones. You can then create your own. You can draw. It's the biggest thing to remind yourself there is that it's you don't need to follow this word for word. It's just a guide to inspire you. I think of it like a blueprint. Mm-hmm. The other pillar of the app, which we're really starting to build out this year, is the learning environment. So I've hosted tons of online workshops and courses. I ran last year, I had about 120 students come through a 6-week training that we offered around end-of-life rituals. And I want to take all of those little mini workshops and build them into the app environment. So for the people that are the members, the subscribers, you can have a monthly or yearly subscription. I want there to be a place where they can go and think, oh gosh, a client just reached out, or a friend reached out, and they have a child who died, and they really want to acknowledge the grief that the family and the friends might be holding. And I want to be able to create a ceremony workshop that explores kids' relationship with grief and how to explore that. On the other side of it, maybe there's something around, I've hosted a lot of divorce ceremonies, which has been really interesting for people. And everybody's always like, oh, I want to know more. I want to know what else I can learn about this and how else this can be done, and where what other cultures are doing. So being able to look at the learning environment as a place to have that ability to go deeper if and when you choose, mm-hmm. I think is really exciting for me and for a lot of the people that have reached out, because I think that there's, the people that come in and they just want something quick and they want something now, and they know, they don't need a whole lot of hand holding. And then there's the people that really want to build a community here, and they want to share back their story after they created a ceremony so that it might inspire someone else. Mm-hmm. And that's my big hope with where Be Ceremonial can grow, is that it will become, this is us, this is our invitation. We've been the catalyst, we've created this framework. Now let's let the community populate it. Let's let people step up and make this their own space. Let's allow this to be a place that connects us and inspires us when we hear stories from people around the world and how they took the same 5 rituals that I took, and yet their ceremony turned out so differently. Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. I want to hear about that. And that's the storyteller in me, is just wanting to create a space where those stories can be celebrated and witnessed.
That's wonderful. Well, I feel like what you've created with this, the two of you, it's just such a gift. So on behalf of, everybody everywhere, I just want to thank you so much. And I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to join me in this exploration of Megan and Johan's work at Be Ceremonial. I hope that a piece of Megan's story, either a moment of creating ritual to honor a life transition or her overall entrepreneurial spirit, has inspired you as it has inspired me. Megan will be back soon to speak more about slow technology and how she is using ritual to transition from pandemic to endemic. Megan Sheldon is a cultural mythologist, end-of-life storyteller, and celebrant. She is also the co-founder of Be Ceremonial, the world's first ceremony creation platform, giving you the ritual tools you need to create your own ceremony. You can sign up for a free account at beceremonial.com or download the app in the App Store. Our music is by Terry Hughes. Find us on IG and Twitter at Shame Piñata. Reach us through our website, shamepiñata.com, and subscribe to the show on your favorite player. Also be sure to check out our second show, Daily Magic for Peace, supporting you as you support Ukraine. I'm Colleen Thomas. Thanks for listening.